The Thought Fox is the most complex poem that Mr. Ted Hughes has ever written. Uh, what is more important about the poem? That is the title of the poem. The poet could have gone for an alternative title, that is an imagined fox. But the word thought fox really bears multi layers of explanations. Okay, we will study this poem with Mac Cockrell and Nettie Farish. Okay, we will be talking about most of the important and critical issues that has been highlighted by them jointly. So the poem begins with I imagine this midnight moment's forest and something else is alive beside the clock's loneliness and this blank page where my fingers move. So we will read the poem from the ending line of the first stanza. Okay, what is the story with the poem? What is the story with the poet? In fact, as usual, for Mr. Ted Hugh, it's a problem before the real conception of the poetry. Okay, probably that kind of dilemma has been earlier experienced by Philip Sidney. Okay, what just remember, great with the child to speak, but helpless in my thoughts. So in Philip Sidney's Loving in Truth, Mr. Sidney was waiting for the proper creation of the poetry, but for him the dilemma was he could not deliver it. And in the very same way, in the poem The Thought Fox, the poet is also waiting with a blank page. In the blank page, his fingers were moving. The page was blank. The page was blank. The fingers were moving vacantly, meaning yielding without any result. What happened there? In delivering the poetry, the poet was an absolute failure so far. But what happens there? The clock's loneliness come to the third line of the poem. Clock's loneliness Clock's loneliness reminded the poet he is a failure. But what's happened here? Just imagine more intensely than you usually do. That is the blank page of the poet. The blank page of the poet with which the poet was waiting, it has become an escape window for the poet. Just imagine the page of his poetry as a blank window, and through this window the poet makes a departure where? Departure into the midnight's moment's forest. Okay, it was not the midnight, it was the middle of the midnight. So imagine the poet has escaped into the forest. The time was, it was the middle of the midnight. And what the poet realized there? Okay, so just imagine the blank page where the fingers were moving helplessly. The blank page for the poet became an escape window. Through this escape window, the poet has entered into the forest. Forest of which time? It was a forest of midnight's moment, meaning it was the middle of the midnight. The poet has entered into the forest. And what did the poet see there? The poet realized that something was alive, meaning uh, while moving his finger vacantly, the poet is lost in the complete reverie, and the mode of complete reverie through the escape through the escape window of his blank page, he has entered into the midnight's moment forest. And in the midnight's moment forest, the poet realizes that something was still alive even in the midnight, even in the midnight's moments forest. So the poet discovered some certain ray of success, certain ray of basically positivity, certain ray of hope. Okay, in the explanation section, what I would like to draw, in fact, look, the entire poem comes to the poet as a kind of a reverie. The poem comprises a reverie. This is something the two critics whom I have already mentioned, they focuses on the reverie element of this poem. And what is next? They have also focused on that the poem begins with a kind of a magical incantative spell, and this magical incantative spell has been created by the very clever and cunning use of the alliteration midnight's moment. So the poem begins with a reverie. The reverie comes with a spell, and the spell has been created as usual through through alliteration. Then come to the second stanza. Look, the poet, as I remind you, in the first stanza, the poet was gazing at the blank page. His fingers were moving vacantly. Then, what did the poet? The clock's loneliness reminded the poet his failure. Then the poet discovered an escape window. Okay, the entire page of his poetry became an imaginative window. And through this window, the poet made an escape. You question, where did the poet made an escape? The poet made an escape into the midnight's moments forest. What was the forest? It was the forest. It what time it was? It was the basically midnight's moment. What did the poet experience there? The poet experienced there that something was still alive. The word alive bears some ray of possibilities. Uh, the ray of possibilities for the poet, because the poet was so far moving his finger in the blank page. From the blank page and helpless finger, we have now proceeded to the something that is alive. So the poet is already in the forest. Then what he experiences in the second stanza? Through the window, I see no star. Okay, so when the poet already entered into the forest, what he intensely observed that he saw no star. It was a starless night. No star means complete darkness. And complete darkness may remind you the primordial darkness, the darkness that you generally experience in the Bible, the darkness that you generally experience in the form of abyss, in the form of the essential darkness, in the quintessential darkness. It was a darkness so deep, so intense. But what did the poet realize? Something more near. Meaning, the ray of hope. In the first stanza, the poet reminded that something is alive. Okay, so the poet discovered some positive intuition in himself for poetry, some intuition for poetry in himself. Now, this positive intuition in the poet is getting more substantial, is getting more solid, and that's why the poet says that something more near. And what is more, though deeper within darkness is entering the loneliness. Just observe, just observe. As I mentioned, the poet has already entered into his imaginative midnight's forest, and in the imagination, okay, he experiences the midnight forest, that something is alive. Then he experiences that something is more near. When does the poet realizes that something is more near? When the poet realizes that something is more near, when he saw that it was a star with, it was a sky with no star. It was a star, it was a sky that reminded the poet about the quintessential darkness, about the primordial darkness. Okay, so the word darkness and loneliness, okay, because of the forest midnight's loneliness. So the two important things are very crucial. One is the loneliness of the midnight's moments forest, and the second important thing is the darkness of the forest. Loneliness and darkness made the poet to realize that something, something, something which was becoming very, very solid to him. So earlier that the poet identified as something is alive, now the poet that this living object is now gradually coming to the poet in a more substantial form, in a more solid form. Okay. In the explanation section, okay, the critics I have mentioned so far, they basically focus on that the poet becomes actively aware of the approach of the nearness of the other or the imagination. So look at this. If writing poetry needs imagination, if you write poetry, then if you want to write poetry, then you need imagination. Okay. So what happens here in the second stanza, the poet finds himself in the midnight's moment forest. In the midnight's moment forest, the poet was coming nearer to the object. Probably the most desired object for the poet is imagination. So the poet was nearing imagination in a more substantial form, and for him the atmosphere was very, very congenial, because the forest was not only dark and dense, and at the same time loneliness and darkness favored the poet to near his imagination, which is essential for writing a poem. Look, the poet stands at the literal and figurative threshold. He stares at the blank page, which becomes a dark window. Okay, so the window that I was speaking so far, the blank page for the poet becomes a window. Through this window, the poet made an imaginative escape. The poet made an imaginative escape into the midnight's moment forest. And in the midnight's moment forest, the poet experienced that something is alive. In the second stanza, the poet realizes that the loneliness is so deep, the loneliness is so deep and intense, the darkness is so grave and so rude. And in such a situation, the poet realizes that, okay, the living object, imagination is identified as a living object. The living object that he identified in the first stanza, this living object is nearing to the poet in the second stanza. This living object is undoubtedly the most wanted thing for a poet, if the poet is writing to planning to write a poem. So imagination is the most wanted object of a poet, the most hankered after object for a poet. Come to the second stanza. Cold delicately as the dark snow, a fox's nose touches the twig, lip, and the two eyes sharp a movement, and that now, and again now, and now, and now. Okay, so once again, in the stanza 3, I would like to draw the attention of the reader that don't be lost in imagination like the poet himself. So, what is the story here? So, in the first stanza, the object is identified as something is alive. In the second stanza, the objective is identified as that something is near. So, this nearing object may be imagination, maybe a physical fox that was becoming very, very solid and visible, and it was getting a substantial form. Okay, just imagine the two parallel journey. Okay, it may be that the poet was in the mode of writing a poem, and he was in the desperate need of imagination, and for him ultimately imagination was getting solid and substantial. You just imagine this kind of journey, and there is another kind of journey. The another kind of journey, it may be that the page of the blank page for the poet became an escape window. Through this escape window, the poet was gazing at the forest, and in the forest at first he identified a living object, then he identified that the object was getting nearer to him. And in the third stanza, okay, in the third stanza there occurs a kind of a metaphorical identification of the fox at the physical level. So in the first two stanzas of the poem, the fox occurred at the imaginative level, at the imagination level, at the description level. Okay, it was an imaginative fox. Really, it was a thought fox. But in the third stanza of the poem, okay, the description is so vivid, the description is so lively, that as if we come across a physical fox, as if the fox was the fox was crossing the ground and leaving a footprint on the snow, cold and delicately as the dark snow. Okay, so what happens there? It was the fox at physical level. It was walking through the forest. Okay, it was walking through the forest, and the feeling to the poet was very, very cold. And the next important thing was, with the nose, the fox was touching the twigs. So the fox was crossing the forest, touching the twigs. Not only that, in most of the cases for these canine creatures, this often happens that when some canine creatures like cats and dogs, they walk in the darkness, we generally identify their motion, okay, through their glowing eyes. Okay, canine creature, they have their glowing or burning eyes in the night, meaning canine creatures are generally identified by the glow of their eye in the night. In the day you can generally see the physical body, but in the night you identify the existence through the glowing eye. So what happens here, in the stanza uh, 3 of the poem, the poet realizes that this is the fox that occurs at the physical level. It was a fox that was basically mingled with the darkness of the snowy night. It was crossing the path, and with the nose it was touching the twigs. Not only that, the two eyes, just imagine, the fox's nose is mentioned here, the two eyes are mentioned here, as if the two eyes indicating a forward journey of the fox. And what is next? How will you understand the journey that the fox was nearing? Now and again, now and now and now. It may be, once again, Mr. Hugh plays with the syntax, as if with the proper arrangement of the syntax, the poet has captured the right kinetic motion of the fox. Okay, the noise of the each step is measured through this syntactic arrangement. Okay, the noise, just imagine the fox is putting a step, and the poet said that now and again now. It may be that and again now, it was a longer step that the fox had there, and now it may be some smaller step, it may be some shrinking step, meaning it was a very narrower step the fox was having there. So in the stanza 3, we physically come across the fox. So in the first stanza, the object that was identified as something is living, something is alive. In the second stanza, it was further identified that something is nearer. So the imaginative fox of the two stanza is now described at the physical level. It was not stopped. The fox was not standing there. It was having a kind of a motion. The motion of this fox is measured because while it was walking the forest, he was touching the twigs. At the same time, the fox was making a gesture. It was making a gesture with the nose by touching the twigs, and it was making a forward motion. The forward motion were measured by the two glowing eyes of this kind of canine creatures. And probably with the proper arrangement of the syntax, probably the poet has measured the perfect kinetic forward motion of the fox as well. Then come to the explanation level. The poet has crossed these various threshold to make a contact with the totem figure of the unconscious or the imagination. Okay, so uh, the third stanza is very very important, because what happens there, uh, through the imagination the poet has almost entered into the unconscious level. The fox that occurred so far at the imagination level, this fox you identify at your consciousness level, at your unconsciousness level. So you, Mr. Ted Hughes had often been fascinated by this kind of totem like figure, by that kind of descriptive fox like figure. Then come to the fourth stanza, and this is going to be very bold one. Set neat print into the snow, meaning the third stanza introduced the physical journey of the fox. The fox was crossing the forest, cannot be identified, because the fox is black, and probably it was pretty much unidentifiable in the dark night and black fox, probably not identifiable. Still, the poet, with his acute intention, the poet was able to identify that it was walking the path, it was touching the twig, and it was touching the twig. And not only this, the forward journey was identifiable through the glowing eyes. Then same journey continues, sets neat prints into the snow. While the fox was having a physical forward journey, while making a journey, the fox was leaving a kind of a print on the snow. Okay, the entire landscape and its effect, the entire landscape and the journey and its effect, all are described here. Between the trees, oirily lame, a shadow lags by stump in the hollow of a body that is bold to come. Okay, just imagine, earlier you get the nose, then you get the eyes, then you when it is mentioned that neat print, the fox's legs were leaving a kind of a neat prints on the snow. So the nose is mentioned, the eyes are mentioned, the four legs are mentioned, and finally in the last line of the fourth stanza, even the body is mentioned. What was basically dominating the poet's imagination? The poet realized that the fox was journeying, the physical fox was journeying in the forest. The black body remained pretty much unidentifiable with the dark night. The dark body remained unidentified with the black night. The poet saw that the fox was crossing the forest path, and it was touching the twigs. And probably the two glowing eyes became an indicator of its kinetic forward journey. And in the fourth stanza, it became more prominent that the fox was leaving a kind of a neat prints on the snow. It was crossing the path between the trees. It was leaving a footprint, it was crossing the trees, it was crossing the path between the trees. And what happens here? The poet is pretty much impressed that it was a bold body. It was a body that is bold to come. Meaning, the when at the highest level of his exercise of imagination, when the poet saw the fox, the poet simply was wonderstruck. The poet was surprised at his imagination. Meaning, in the first stanza, something he identified as something is alive. In the second stanza, he something identified that something is more near. In the third stanza, he constructed a physical fox. And in the fourth stanza, he realizes that the fox is so brave, so bold, with the four legs, with a bold body, with the four legs, with a bold body, and with the two glowing eyes, and with the nose that was touching the twig. Okay, at the explanation level, what we say, The fourth stanza traces the movement of the fox through the trees. That's a pretty clear to us. Gradually, the blank and snowy page fills with the print and the track of the track of the thought fox. So this is where you ultimately get a kind of an impression. Look, when the poem begins, the page was empty. The page was empty. The more the poet exercises his imagination, okay, the more the vagueness was removed, clarity is achieved. Okay, the more the poet gave up the vagueness and achieved clarity, okay, the thought fox was getting more substantial to the poet. And what happens there, not only the thought fox was becoming very clear to the poet, but also the page that we earlier discovered as a blank, that page was also getting printed. It was getting printed. And not only the fox was becoming clear and solid and substantial, but also the page was getting printed very gradually. Look, look at the next journey. Stanza 4, across clearings and eye, a widening, deepening greenness, brilliantly and concentratedly coming about its own business. Okay, across the clearing. In this stanza, we have all about the ing business. Okay, if the fourth stanza indicates a kind of a physical movement of the fox, in the fifth stanza, the word clearing, widening, deepening, coming. Okay, this indicates the further forward motion. Okay, in fact, while teaching the W.B. Yeats's Easter 1916, okay, I have given you the idea of fixity and fluxity, mobility and immobility. Okay, here clearings, widenings, deepening and coming, these are the four verbs with ing. Okay, they clarify your idea that the fox was making a kind of a forward movement. Okay, what kind of a movement? It was a movement that was forward. Okay, then what is more? Brilliantly and concentratedly. So look at this, brilliantly and concentratedly. These two words are very crucial. In the first stanza, the poet was still doubtful something is alive. In the second stanza, the poet was partly doubtful that something is more near. In the third stanza, the poet assumed that it may be a fox. In the fourth stanza, the poet discovered a bold body. And in the fifth stanza, okay, the bold body was getting very bright and brilliant, and it was getting a concentrated look. So the first stanza started with a doubt, with a guess. The second stanza started with a partial doubt, and the third stanza basically it started with an kind of an assumption. The fourth stanza gave a kind of an image of a bold fox, and in the fifth stanza, the poet discovered that it was a bold, brilliant, and concentrated body of a fox that was clearing, widening, deepening, and coming about its own business. It was a bold, brilliant, concentrated fox that has come out in the midnight's forest for its own business. Okay, what does the fox do in the night? Basically, fox in the night, in the midnight's night, in the midnight, fox in the midnight, basically they come out of their hole in search of their business. It may be hunting or anything else. Then come at the imagination, at the explanation level. The fifth stanza is the most abstract, while also seeking to convey the fullness and the primordial magic of a reverie. Okay, in the first stanza it was a reverie, in the second stanza it was a reverie, in the third stanza the poet was coming out of the reverie, and in the fourth stanza he discovered a bold fox like figure, And in the fifth stanza, the reverie is over and the poet has identified a bold, brilliant, concentrated body of a fox that was clearing, deepening, deepening, and coming of its whole for its own business. Okay, then this is the last stanza of the poem. Till with a sudden sharp hot stink of fox it enters the dark hole of the head. The window is still starless. The clock strikes. The page is painted. What happens there? In the fifth stanza, the image of the fox, it was bold, brilliant, and concentrated body. And what it was doing, it has come out. It was coming out in the search of its business. Basically, fox, like canine creatures, they come out in the middle of the night in search of their foods or hunting or their respective business. So what happens here? It was a fox intended to a kind of a business. Probably the business is over, and what happens there? With a sudden sharp hot stink of fox. Just imagine the quick entry of the fox into its hole. Just imagine the suddenness. A fox enters into the hole in a sudden flash. The moment is very, very rapid and sudden, unpredictable, quick and fragile and nimble. It enters the dark hole of the head. So the best analogy that Mr. Ted Hughes has referred, I would like to draw your attention to the poem of Philip Sidney, Loving in Truth. In Loving in Truth, Philip Sidney elaborated his idea that writing poetry is almost like a giving birth to a child. Writing poetry is as painful as giving birth to a child. That was the analogy for Mr. Philip Sidney. And here, in case of Mr. Ted Hughes, writing poetry is almost like the quick jump of a fox out of its hole. The quick jump of a fox into its hole. Just imagine the rapid exit of a fox from its hole. Just imagine the rapid entry of a fox into its hole. Just imagine the entry or the exit of a fox into its hole. The moment is so rapid, so uncertain, so sudden, so unpredictable that you cannot see it, you cannot measure it. Okay, according to Mr. Ted Hughes, probably writing poetry is also like the departure of a fox, like the exit of a fox from its hole. Writing poetry is almost like the entry of a fox into its hole. The process is so rapid, so fast, so changing. Okay, that something probably human mind cannot measure it. Probably only the imagination of a poet can measure it. Look what happens here. The window is starless. In the first stanza, the poet used no star. The night is still starless and the clock is still making a noise. But surprisingly enough, the poet saw the page, the blank page of the first stanza is now printed. Okay, just imagine the two simultaneous process. Okay, the fox is making its entry into the hole. Such a quicker entry of the fox into the hole, and such a quicker exit of imagination from the poet's brain into the pages of poetry. How does imagination how does imagination exit from the poet's mind to the pages of poetry? How does poetry come from mind to the page? The process is the rapid entry of a fox into its hole. Imagine the rapid entry of a fox into its hole. Imagine the quicker exit of imagination from the brain of a poet into the pages, and that's why the page is printed. Okay, in the image, in the explanation level, the force of the reverie overwhelms the poet, and the sudden physical presence and departure of the fox in the sixth stanza. Okay, so the physical departure of the fox, the physical departure of the fox is imagined as the departure of imagination from the poet's brain into the pages, into the physical pages of poetry. How imagination, how imagination is delivered by the poet's brain. Imagination is delivered by the poet's brain into the pages of poetry, the way a fox enter into its hole. The two simultaneous process are very unique, very complicated, cannot be traced with the human mind, can be only imagined with human imaginations. Okay, so according to Mr. Just we are going to make a overall conclusion of this poem. According to Mr. Ted Hughes, imagination is also a kind of a primordial force. Imagination is also the primordial force in a poet, in 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 the non-human animals, among the human animals. Okay, just imagine the quickest entry of the fox into the hole. This is very quick and rapid. Okay, the way it enters, the fox enters the hole, the process is quick. The way the poet's brain delivers imagination into the pages of poetry, that process is very quicker. And that's why the poem ends with a final note that if someone is planning to write an authentic poetry, if someone is planning to write an authentic poetry, one cannot do this without archaic powers. By archaic powers, basically, the primordial force is mentioned, or by primordial force, we mean the imaginative power in the poet. Without the primordial force, without the archaic powers, authentic poetry cannot be written. So it's a kind of an answer to those who is writing, who is planning to write an authentic poetry.